The views and opinions expressed in the Golden Boot podcast are those of the speaker and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of the Golden Boot podcast as a whole.
Y'all ready to get rolling? Quiet on the set. Hey, welcome back. Another hot episode of the Golden Boot. It's your boy Pooh Bear, and I'm holding it down tonight. Our man Ann is out, but we do have a special guest to join us later on. But man, what a weekend for college football. Week 2 used to be the cupcake weekend. It used to be week 2 and then week 13, 14, whatever it is. The second to last weekend of the month of the season. Those used to be cupcake weekends. Those cupcakes bite back. We also had some big time matchups. Some pretty good games, really good games this weekend. Look forward to bringing them to you, talking with you. But first, man, let's go ahead and get a shout out to our sponsors over at BetOnline. BetOnline.ag. We will be back in 1 minute. BetOnline.ag is your number one source for all your sports information, stats, news, and scores. Get the latest odds, lines, and player injury reports for this year's NBA and NHL playoffs. BetOnline is always your sports information headquarters. This season, we have you covered for all your sports wagering needs. We have everything from NBA, NFL, MLB, and NHL to golf, tennis, UFC, and boxing. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info, including live betting options and your favorite casino and card games that you can play right from your home. Head on over to betonline.ag today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Be sure to use the promo code BLEAV to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts. Ladies and gentlemen, we had to bring back the man himself. If I'm not mistaken, he was our first guest on the Golden Boot way back yonder. Episode like 4 or something like that. But had to bring it back our guy, especially to talk about this LSU team for 2024. None other than the staff writer from Tiger Bait, Mr. Preston Guy. Thanks for joining me, Preston. Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, man. What's going on? Hey, thanks for having me, dude.
No problem. Man, glad to have you back, man. Ant posted to put out, they said, hey, man, we got to get Christian back on the show. I said, yo, you know what? I got you. I'll reach out. And I forgot to reach out until like yesterday. But man, what a good weekend for college football for most teams. I'll say it like that. As a college football fan, you enjoyed the weekend. There are some teams who are disappointed in their team. There's some people who realize that their team is not as good as they thought. So where does that fall for you on the LSU meter?
Yeah, look, LSU's got some red flags going right now. I'm not saying it's time to panic, but it is time to recognize these aren't like great signs that you're seeing.
Right.
I mean, Nicholls came in here and outran you by nearly 100 yards. It's not like they had some crazy triple option attack and ran for 300 yards while passing for 12. You know, it was like they ran for $164. They ran for $150. You ran for 64. That's a big red flag if you can't run the ball against Nicholls, and
Right.
it is one of those situations you have to look at Nicholls, and it's like, and I mean this in no disrespect to anybody on Nicholls' roster, but I mean every single one of those players would come play for LSU if they had an offer from LSU. That's just the way the world is.
Right.
To not be able to run the ball against them, that's a bad red sign, and I'm not saying that LSU's got. There's a lot of people who think this is a catastrophic 6-6 season, something crazy like that. I'm not there. But I am saying, there's some things they need to iron out and straighten out. They're still playing for everything. They still control their own destiny, but they got to fix some things. If you can't get 3 yards when you need it, that's a problematic way to run your offense.
Right. So I didn't get a chance to fully watch the game live. I was on double duty. I had to keep an eye on Houston, and I was also at a Alabama A&M game, covering on the sideline, just kind of taking pictures and stuff. So I didn't get. I watched live, but not really. I wasn't really paying attention. I went back and watched today, because I kept seeing over Twitter and how some people were feeling about the game. I was like, it couldn't have been that bad. And then I watched it, and it was that bad.
Yeah, great.
You spoke about the inabilities to run the ball. I was looking at the inability to even stop the run at all.
Yeah. It's twofold. This would be a very good 7-on-7 football team.
Great, great team. But I don't want to focus on the bad right now. Like you said, we can point those things out, and I don't think anything that's necessarily bad right now isn't something that can be coached up or worked through. I don't think there's a glaring issue. There's the only other thing that stands out to me is the health of our team.
Oof, injury bugs biting hard right
Very
now.
hard. And it's not even like hey, we're banged up, we'll be back. This is like, no.
Yeah.
This is, yeah.
It's a little mixed bag. I mean, Jacoby and Guillory, that was, if you had asked me who the first player you can't lose this year, it'd be Garrett Nussmeier. You can't lose Garrett Nussmeier. And especially seeing how much of this offense just lives or dies by Nussmeier at this point. Yeah, absolutely. That's true. The second one I would have pointed to would probably be Jacoby and Guillory, and he looks like he's done for the season. Of course, Kyle Parker and Chris Hilton dealing with their issues. John Emery Jr. After man,
that one hurt me, like,
yeah. I mean,
emotionally.
and I literally remember tweeting out in the first game, are we due for a John Emery redemption arc? Kind of coming out of nowhere, and then torn ACL. And it's like, you hate to say it, but like, man, tell me that's just not par for the course with John Emery's career. I feel really bad for the kid. So yeah, no, there's a lot of things to be concerned with at this point, but that's why you pay a coach $9 million a year. Go figure it out. Go do your best and put something together. You've got an elite quarterback. You do have an elite pass blocking offensive line, and your defense is improving, and you just invested a ton into some good coaches to make your defense even better. Go figure it out. You're LSU. That's kind of where
Yeah.
muted yourself.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I had a visitor at the door. Yeah, the injuries, with John Emery. Like I said, that one hurt me emotionally as a fan. Jacobian was a guy that I had spoken about, that I thought this was like redemption year. This was his money year as well. Not having Chris Hilton available, Kyle Parker, and the Chris Hilton thing. Another guy who I was like, hey, this is going to be the year to, step up. But all we've seen is, injured throughout his career. The talent's there. We see that, but kind of almost waiting. What's the next shoe to drop? And I hate to live out the season with that fear.
Yeah, but it's legitimate at this point. And if you remember, I mean, I don't think we'll ever see a 2021 ever again where
Mhm.
it really felt like you had more players hurt than healthy at certain times. Of course, you fired your whole strength and conditioning staff to avoid that. But it's sad because you came out of fall camp, and I remember making a note to myself that said, "Huh, well, you got just Chris Hilton banged up. That's the healthiest fall camp I could remember." But then as soon as you snap the first game, it's like, oh, oh, oh. So there's some serious concern. Of course, Dellinger is dealing with a head injury. You got to start worrying a little bit here. Can they straighten this out, get healthier, get some of these guys back? I think ultimately, though, as long as Nussmeier continues to play the way he's playing, I do think you have a chance to beat anybody. In 3 starts, the guy has over 1,000 yards passing now. That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And I believe it's, let's see, 3 touchdowns in the bowl game, 6 touchdowns last night, and then 2 touchdowns against USC. So that sounds a lot like 11 touchdowns, 2 interceptions for Nussmeier, which of course one of those interceptions was a desperation play. So
Yeah.
I mean, it counts on paper, but I mean, do you really hold that against him? I don't.
No. I actually said last week that I thought it was the interception he threw was so meaningless that that's what upset me more than if he had
Yeah.
thrown an interception in a big play.
Yeah.
Yeah. They mentioned last night Miles Brennan. The only I think it was Miles Brennan, the only other quarterback or the last quarterback to throw for like 300 yards in his first 3
Yeah.
starts,
Right.
stuff like that. Man, it's we knew the potential that we saw in Miles that year and the expectations we had. And even the following year, it's funny that we kind of look at Nuss the same way now and like, hey, I'm expecting big numbers from you now at this
Yeah.
point.
Yeah, I mean, that's what he's done though. I mean, he's earned that. I mean, he's played very well. And I'll say this, one of the big downsides with Miles Brennan was he struggled mightily when it mattered, and he went 1-2 as a starter, right? Um, so that was one of his big problems, is that a lot of this was you're down 2 touchdowns and they're playing a little bit of soft zone on you and you're able to eat them up, a little bit of that. It really hadn't been the case with Nussmeier.
Mhm.
If you think about it, a lot of his games were tight games that came down
Right.
to the end. Of course, he led a game-winning drive against Wisconsin, um, and then USC. He did lead a game-tying drive, but of course USC had the last laugh there as they left too much time for USC, and they just went downfield and marched and got the score. So Nussmeier's 2-1. It's kind of a mixed bag, but ultimately, I mean, you won a meaningful game, you lost a meaningful game, and you won a pointless game. Whereas, Miles Brennan's one win was Vanderbilt.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
believe, if I'm not mistaken, Vanderbilt went 0-9 that year, if I'm not
I
mistaken, the
think so.
COVID year.
I think
So
so.
yeah, I mean,
All right. Talk about the good. We talked a little bit about Nuss, Juwan Johnson emerging, saying stepping up big for this team. I think that was one of the key things that I saw last night.
There were 2 Juwan Johnsons who caught touchdowns this weekend for Louisiana teams. Did you notice that? Juwan Johnson for the Saints,
Yeah.
Juwan Johnson for LSU. I look at this and I'm like, we are talking about the LHSAA all-time yardage leader, Juwan Johnson. I kind of look at this move and I'm like, I wonder if this could be a blessing in disguise. I
Yeah.
mean, he was going to have to grind and work his way on field on defense. And we all know the offensive skill set he has. And I almost look at this, I'm like, it's almost kind of like a no duh moment. Like, very impressive what he was able to do. They didn't give him a carry, but I believe they threw the ball to him. What was that? 3 times he caught the ball. So, impressive effort for him catching the ball. Of course, he catches that touchdown. Yeah, 3 catches for 16 yards. That's what he had. So, love what I saw there. And look, there's other things to like. I like what I see out of Kyron Lacey. He had 3 touchdowns. I like the effort and grittiness from this defense. There was a lot of young players, okay, and that kind of was almost a theme of the night is how much effort they put into getting young players on the field early and often. Trades Green was a focal point. He caught a touchdown. Jawan Johnson was a focal point. Caden Durham got in the game, didn't play well, but he got in the game. You had on the defensive side, you had PJ Woodland starting, Kylan Jackson starting. You had Deshaun Spears out there early. A lot of young guys they're trying to work out there. I think that they've kind of honed in on their best chance of getting this team where it needs to be. Their most talented players are the young ones right now, and they got to get those young guys up to speed. So I think that we know Brian Kelly doesn't like starting young players. I think that he's kind of honed in and realized that we got to get these guys caught up if we're going to have a chance to compete by the end of the year.
Yeah. Like I said, man, I truly enjoyed it. I do want to say, man, kudos to Nicholls State for the effort that they play with, the change in mentality. Their coach, the team is definitely taking on his identity. I love some of the philosophies he had. I don't believe in all of them, but I love them. But it has to worry you that you took on a Nicholls State team that was probably gritty and grindy. You had more talent, and you still couldn't, as far as coaching. Well, I'm not going to say coaching. As far as performance-wise, overall, you were pretty even last night. But you go up against now a South Carolina team that's coming up next week that seems to be red hot after a slow start against Old Dominion.
Yeah, no, and Lenora Sellers is an absolutely dynamic weapon. I understand in the passing game he leaves some things to be desired, but I mean, absolutely, it's a tough test. College Game Day is going to be there, so that means that that atmosphere is going to be as lit as they come at Bryce Williams Stadium. So better be ready. You know that they're going to have a rushing attack that's ready to test you. You got to play better football than you've played the last two games. I'll argue last night LSU played worse than they did against USC, despite winning the game. They showed some good promise against USC. There were some signs. You're going to have to work on running the ball. You're going to have to be more consistent in the secondary on defense. And frankly, there's really not very many areas on this team that are great or spectacular. The things that you're good at, you're going to have to work on getting even better. You're good at passing the ball. I think you need to really expand that, take some shots downfield, which, by the way, they took more shots against Nicholls. They didn't hit on a lot of these shots, but it was like against USC, they were almost afraid to get vertical, which, an offense featuring Garrett Nussmeier seems unheard of. Like, imagine if we were talking 4 years ago and we said, yeah, Nussmeier, they wouldn't let him throw it past 15 yards. It's like, what? That guy, the kid who came in the game and every play was 4th and 30? Really? Okay. So it is nice to see his maturation, but I really do think they're going to have to expand that. One of the things I actually applaud Joe Sloan on is against USC, I kind of was like, man, they're really trying to force a running game that is not going to happen. You're just wasting plays and drives trying to make something happen. It's not there. Get creative. Artificially manufacture a running game, get some bubble screens, do some jet sweep passes, that kind of stuff, and do a short passing game. Like focus on throwing the ball. In this game, we saw 17 runs to 38 passes. So they kind of realized that balance is not going to be their identity this year, and I think that they should go heavy into that and just focus on being a really good air raid style team.
Yeah. Paul Sub said this game gave me flashbacks of Towson.
Yeah, a lot of that. Which, by the way, they did pull away more so than they ever did against Towson in 2012. That game was, that 2012 team was frustrating to watch at times, oozing with talent all over the field.
2012 that happened?
That was 2012, wow. Yeah. I believe they beat Towson. It was like 30-12, something like that. And it's like, really? Ugh. But that 2012 team, the offense it had the pieces. It had Jarvis Landry. It had Odell Beckham. It had Mettenberger. Jeremy Hill was a
30,
freshman on that team.
38-22. Yeah.
38-22. I was close. Okay, I was close. But yeah, that's a 2-score game. That was a very unremarkable performance that night, and I just they just couldn't put it together, man. It's sad because they brought in Cam Cameron the next year, and I literally think there was so much talent on that team that if you went from a Greg Stadrawa, who really was just I don't know what he was doing calling plays for LSU. I'm gonna be honest. I mean, I thought there was better guys on that staff. Insminger was on that staff, by the way.
Yeah.
I have no idea
Yeah.
why Les Miles picked Greg Stadrawa over Steve Insminger to call plays, but that's what he did. And then if they had just had any offensive identity whatsoever, that 2012 team could have competed for a championship, but they didn't. They didn't. And yeah, they had a real slow performance against Towson. So a lot of energy from that team. I'll say this. If this team ends up with the same style results as the 2012 team, I think we should all be pretty happy because that 2012 team did go 10-2, and 10-2 gets you in the
That'll
playoff.
get you in. Yeah.
That gets you in the
10-2. I'll never forget because I went to the bowl game. They played Clemson that year, and unfortunately, LSU was the team that got Clemson started. Ironically, LSU was the team that ended Clemson as well. So,
interesting. It all began and ended with LSU. Yeah, because remember the year before that, Clemson had 70 burger dropped on them in the bowl game.
West Virginia,
West Virginia, Geno Smith and Tavon Austin and all those boys.
Do you know the defensive coordinator for Clemson at the time?
Kevin Steele.
Kevin Steele.
Yeah, it's funny. I was in the SID when they hired Kevin Steele, and I just remember him talking about that. Like we were asking him questions, and he's like, "Yeah, I've been all over it. I've had it all happen to me. I've been promoted after losing all these games, and I've been fired after winning the ACC." And I was like, "Well, you conveniently left out the part where you got 70 hung on you, Kevin, but that's all right. That's all right." Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. Oh, that's hilarious. Let me ask you this: who, outside of the guys we named, who is someone who impressed you this weekend for LSU?
Let's see here.
I know that might be a loaded question.
I know. I kind of named a lot of them, man. Let's go to the defense and think about that. Let's see here. Gabriel Relaford. That's the name. That's the one. Gabriel Relaford, true freshman, came in at defensive end. Oh, and by the way, a very deep defensive end group too. By the way, he had 6 tackles, and he looked good. He looked real good. So that's a guy to keep an eye out. I know you've got a ton of veteran and talented players defensive end, but don't sleep on him, man.
Yeah. Man. You kind of mentioned it, and we kind of talked about it. LSU and South Carolina now the Gameday.
That's right.
They were named the Gameday location for this upcoming week. I'm gonna be honest. That has, at least for me, that adds a lot more pressure.
Sure
on
does.
me as because you're, like I said, right? I mean,
I don't think that's a hot take at all.
It appears that South Carolina is kind of hot. I'm kind of questionable on what Kentucky is as a whole, but they're kind of hot, and you're kind of don't know where you are.
Yeah, I mean, there's no ifs, ands about it, and this will be a true SEC road test. And frankly, you're going to have a lot more eyes on you than you normally would because this is a junk slate this next week. We talked about week 2 used to be Cupcake week, and there were a lot of Cupcake matchups in week 2. Don't get me wrong, it's just the Cupcakes bit back this week, including a shout out Houston Cougars going to Norman, Oklahoma. Played them tough. I think
the referees gave them that game, man.
I think they need to get this kid Jayshon Riggle a little more involved. What you think?
I'm not going to say too much, but yeah, I agree. That game, it was so fun to watch because I was there last week for the UNLV game, And to see that up close when you're amongst the other families that are going through that same agony is terrifying.
Yeah.
Shout out to the Braithwaites. I met Christian Braithwaite's parents
Oh, yeah.
while I was there. Yeah. But yeah, man, it's tough. So to see them bounce back the way they did against Oklahoma, Oklahoma, I don't know. I don't know if they're ready this year.
Yeah, it looks like, there when you merge conferences, sometimes there's teams that drop off a little bit that were kind of thriving on eating up on some lower level competition. I remember we talked about that West Virginia team. Since they've moved to the Big 12, that program has taken a massive step back. If you remember, in 2007, actually they were one game away from playing in the national championship.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Shout out to Skip Holtz.
That's right.
Yeah,
Skip Holtz and
USF.
Pat White busted his hand against Pittsburgh that night. And Jarrett Brown was the backup quarterback, and he ended up being a really good player.
I was thinking about the that was the year I thought didn't South Florida beat them early in the year, or was that
They sure did. Yeah. Mike Grothe was the coach, but they lost twice because remember everybody lost in 2007. It was pandemonium, and in the year of pure chaos, it's only fitting that the kings of chaos, Les Miles and the LSU Tigers, came out on top. But anyways, they were 11-1 or I guess 10-1 playing Pitt in the final game. And Pat White, I don't think he broke his hand, but he busted it and he couldn't play. And they had Jared Brown go in, and then they just 13-9. They couldn't get it done. And then next thing you know, Missouri beats Kansas, and basically the stars aligned and the LSU Tigers got in. But anyway, since then, West Virginia moved to the Big 12, and when you don't have to play USF and Cincinnati and UConn and all those Big East teams, the program's kind of taking a step back. And you kind of wonder, is that going to happen to Oklahoma? Although it is truly a blue blood program, but rich history and all that good stuff. There are a lot of people speculating that they might not survive the grind of the SEC, whereas a lot of those same people are saying Texas is more fit for it. We'll see, man. I don't know. I am a believer in the quarterback. I do like Jackson Arnold, but I want to see Oklahoma play some more rigid competition as it goes on.
Yeah, I think in the next 5 years, OU definitely passes Texas in the SEC conversation.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah. You mentioned OU. Kansas State survives Tulane.
That's
Oklahoma
right.
survives.
A really bad PI call led to that.
Yeah. Oh, it was terrible. Oklahoma State survives
Arkansas. Yeah, that was a good game. Yeah, Arkansas went up early. I think they were up 28-13, and they blew it.
Yeah,
which is very fitting for Arkansas. But hey, man, look, I'll say this about the game. Watching it, a lot of people were chopping up Arkansas as not like a gimme win, but like a very manageable win for LSU. It's not a. I don't know.
It's definitely
that anymore. Yeah. It's going to be a tough game.
Yeah, this is what I feared at Texas A&M when Bobby Petrino went there. What's this effect on offense? Because I can imagine if Jimbo actually gave up reins and Texas A&M had this offense with that defense, I mean,
yeah. Well, the thing is, the head coach has to let him do his thing.
Bingo. Oh, forgot about this fact, but shout out to our man Paul Sub said Baker has seen Beamer's offense the last 2 years. He's held the Gamecocks in check to an average of 11 points.
Interesting. So, very, very good nugget there, Andrew. And a lot of people were talking about, well, I think like on our post-game show last night, they asked us, well, do you really think LSU has less talent than Missouri? And I'm like, well, right now, yes, because you got to understand, you didn't go to the transfer portal and find a bunch of saviors of the program. This is mostly the same players that you had on defense a year ago. Yeah. And the hope is that you're going to coach them better and this defense is going to be better. So it's like, no. These are the same players that we saw with poor coaching a year ago were unable to not be one of the worst defenses in LSU history. So no, I don't think LSU has the talent on defense that Missouri had. So definitely not saying LSU will hold them to 11 points, but yeah, you're right that's a good matchup. It's a good history to think about there.
Yeah. I see a matchup that was magical. Didn't see it going down this way, but our good friends over at Notre Dame, man, they lost the game. They lost the game to Northern Illinois, 16-14.
Got to watch out for them Huskies, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me just tell you, I think there are certain cities in America that Preston Guy is just unemployable at. You've got Seattle, Washington, you've got Eugene, Oregon, almost a little bit Los Angeles this last week. South Bend, Indiana is number one of those where I will never be able to step foot in that city. Okay. I will be tarred and feathered. They hate my guts. That's okay. I love them anyways. And last week, it's like anytime a Brian Kelly team takes a step back, has a bump on the road, right? And I'm not saying that, for sure it's been all rainbows and sunshine, but overall, the job Brian Kelly has done getting LSU's program back up has been good. Now this year, you're looking to take that step forward. You're 3 years into the program, but not sometimes the curve is a little slower. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But overall, we are talking about a 21-8 coach who inherited an absolute dumpster fire of a program, and overall, he's doing better in his first 3 years than he did at Notre Dame. Worth noting, but he loses to USC. These things happen, and of course, all these Notre Dame fans are all over our show. I mean, they're paying us super chats to read their snarky comments. I'm like, all right, dog, if you want to sit there and pay me $10, okay, go for it, man. Like, I have no emotions. I'm not on the team. Like, I don't play for Coach Kelly. I just report on the team.
Oh man, I'd love send them this way too, man. Listen, I'll tell them how I feel.
That's what I'm saying. Like, all right,
give you a show.
Get my view time up. Give me some good analytics. I don't care, man. Have some fun. Like, you're supposed to do that.
Ridiculous.
But boy, they went quiet yesterday. Oh man. And of course I gotta hit them with that. Hey, look, y'all used to lose the big games with Brian Kelly. Now y'all lose the big, medium, and small games. So there you go.
I've seen so many Marcus Freeman is not that guy, but that's not what we were hearing.
Yeah.
We were hearing how he was so great for them and he was so much better and a better recruiter. Brian Kelly no longer is it the story Brian Kelly can recruit. You can't say Brian Kelly can't win the big game. I mean, he hadn't won them all for us.
Right.
He's definitely won some big ones for us.
Yeah.
So
right. Well, and I think just, be patient. I don't know if this team is the team that's going to break through and make the playoffs, but there's certainly some things to like about this team, and just let these recruiting classes continue to get in. I think that there's too much impatience with certain fan bases. The thing is that you need to keep your bar high. I'm sorry, your floor is high. Right? Like you need to continue winning 10 games each and every year. There shouldn't be an excuse to not win 10 games every year, but eventually you need to bust beyond that. I think too many programs get tired. They're like, oh man, we lost 3 games. Run the coach out of town. It's like, well, man, it's not how really it's rare. It's tough to actually win that high. Now, eventually you do need to put together some great seasons. That's what I'm saying. In this talent rich state, eventually, if you continue to maintain your roster and recruit well and take care of business, the stars will align. If the stars can align for Les Miles and Ed Ogeron the way they did here, they can align for any coach doing their job. But yeah, no, it's pretty clear at this point that Notre Dame, it's almost like this choose hard culture that they have put in place here. It's almost like it makes it a little tougher for a coach to win as consistently as you would like.
Yeah. I think we've also gotten, we talk about Bama fans getting spoiled. I think we as football fans have gotten spoiled by the same measure of thinking that a successful coach is someone who wins, or the only successful coaches win year after year after year. And it's like, that's not the absolute case. That's that's an anomaly. You may see some repeats and stuff, but it's
Right.
very hard to win at the clip that Nick Saban was winning.
Right, absolutely. Too many people want to be that, and you look at who are your top coaches right now, and who have actually done. There's an argument Ryan Day has done a really good job of that, but even they're grumbling over there in Columbus too. By the way,
Yeah.
they're like, oh, you can't lose 4 straight to Michigan, blah blah blah. Look at Dabo Sweeney. He had an excellent run, and now he's hitting some tougher times as times have changed. I mean, basically, there's Kirby Smart, maybe Ryan Day.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what other coach fits this mold of, perpetually winning 11, 12 games a year, constantly being in the playoff scene? It's like, it doesn't really exist outside of maybe a handful of guys at elite schools. But that's where LSU wants to get with Brian Kelly. But it's not happening thus far. Is the point?
Yeah. Well, man, Preston, I completely agree. And I want to say I want to thank you again for coming on with me tonight. Don't want to hold you past your time. But one last question for you.
Okay.
Michigan, Texas. This game was I think a lot of people saw this game going the way it did, but we just couldn't fathom that it would actually happen.
Yeah. I remember thinking to myself before that game, I was like, this feels like 13-point win for Texas. I mean, Texas brought back a lot from that team that lost in the playoffs, barely lost to Washington in the playoffs, and they lose some pieces, but Michigan, man, they lost the sign stealer. They lost the head coach. They lost, they didn't hire an exemplary staff either. If you look at how they're graded and whatnot, they were kind of middle of the road guys. And they lost their quarterback. I mean, they lost their run. I mean, they lost everything to that championship run. So I look at this a little bit like, it's like the defending champion, no matter what's going to be ranked in the top 5 or 10, whatever. I think they were 10th coming into this game.
Yeah.
That's just kind of how it goes. It's like, well, they're the defending champs. It's like, well, if you remember like 2008 LSU, it was pretty obvious that team had some issues and they lost a lot. 2020 LSU lost even more. They lost both play callers on both sides of the ball. They lost Joe Brady and they lost defensive coordinator Aranda, right? And they lost their quarterback and they lost half their defense and all that good stuff. And it was like, it was just Orgeron coming back. I remember telling people, guys, this is going to be Orgeron's defining season. And people freaked out at the time because it's like, whoa, he just won a championship. What are you talking about? It's like, he did. And he brought all those pieces in. But if he's truly an elite coach, he'll be able to continue doing it. If that's the reason it happened, was his being an elite coach. Now everything's gone, and excuse me, and it falls right back on you, Ed Orgeron, right back on you, where you have to go out there and you have to do it again. You have to rebuild, and he couldn't do it. He couldn't do it. So that's it. It turned out to be absolutely defining. His legacy is now defined as he won a championship and he wasn't able to sustain success. That being said, there was a lot of red flags with Michigan. Excuse me. I'm sorry. A lot of red flags. Texas dominated that game, was in control of it from the first snap to the last snap. Probably a little surprised at just how dominant. I think Texas proved they were a little better than I thought, and Michigan proved they were as expected.
Yeah. Man. Well, again, Preston, man, thank you so much for coming on with us, man. We got to have you back again.
Sure.
As we move throughout this season. Give my best to Mike and Buddy.
Will do, man. Will do. You take it easy. All right.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, that was our good man, Mr. Preston Guy. Imagine hand claps, hand claps, hand claps, hand claps, hand claps. Hold on, here we go. Y'all know how it is when Anna ain't here. It's all this double duty. But hey, I do want to open up the phone lines. Y'all give us a call at 225-308-1234. Give us a call. Let's chat it up. Last, before we get ready to get out of here, Nebraska and Vanderbilt, both 2-0. Oh man, what's the last time that happened? Vanderbilt beat Virginia Tech week 1. Very impressive win. They beat Alcorn State yesterday, 55-0. So that was interesting. There was a lot of trash talk in that matchup. You know, that's pretty funny. But yeah, that was an interesting win for Vanderbilt, making them 2-0. Nebraska took down Colorado yesterday, 28-10. Preston talked about how Michigan was dominated on the offensive line. Nebraska dominated Colorado from the get-go. Almost feels like Nebraska ended up calling off the dogs early in that one. But yeah, man, very impressive for both. Congratulations. Nebraska's going on the way to be 3-0 as they take on Northern Iowa. And if I'm not mistaken, who does Vandy take on? Vandy has I think they've got another fairly easy non-conference game before they move on. Let's see, who do they have? They've got Georgia State. So looks like Vandy is going to be 3-0 come week 4 when they take on Missouri, who is also going to be 3-0. Very interesting for what was the SEC East. But man, let's move on to some NFL opening weekend. The Saints get a big win. They're now 1-0 after beating Carolina today. So who is this? Oh, got somebody here's bored. Anyway, great score. Great score. Big win for the Saints today. Anybody else? Anybody else got Danny? What you got? Danny says, a little concerned that our team played down to their competition, and does that make the weaker games as concerning as the big ones? Yes. Danny, you watched during the Les Miles days, so you understand how it was playing against weaker competition. And actually, you know, hey, we'll win the game, but will we win this game by 3 points, or will we win it by 30? It's exactly what we're going through right now. I don't know if we're overreacting. Still early in the season. It's been 2 games. But hey. All right. Let's see. Let's go ahead. Get out of here. Not much to talk about tonight. Opening weekend for the NFL. We got a good game on right now. Well, we've got Detroit taking on the Rams. Looking forward to that. Also, interesting situation with Tyreek Hill getting arrested before the game, on his way to the game, on his way to the stadium, and that coming out. It's a very interesting situation with that. Want to see how that's going to end up playing out. That's funny. Danny says overreacting to LSU play and overreacting to Saints win against Carolina. Yeah. Well, man, let's go ahead and get out of here. We'll be back hopefully on Wednesday. We'll have Mr. Rob Brown from the Rob Brown Show. Had him on earlier talking about South Carolina. See if we can get some more intel as we get closer to this game on Saturday. But hey, thank you everyone for tuning in. I want to thank Preston again for coming on with us, having a good conversation about this team. We'll be back later on this week. I like that. We're at.
This show was presented by betonline.ag. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe on Twitter at Golden Boot. On Instagram at Golden Boot. On YouTube at The Golden Boot Pod. On Facebook at The Golden Boot Pod.